Hello and welcome along to the VMTV Rugby Pod. A new face today in Ian McKinley, replacing Alan Quinlan. Not sure he knows, but you're more than welcome, Ian. And Matt, as ever, is alongside me. Want to look at the Six Nations as a whole, Matt, and it was France's day back at the top of the Six Nations title, like they did in 2022. Probably a long time coming, but obviously Ireland have been very good in those couple of years. What did you make of Saturday night? It seemed to be a real party in Paris, but fully deserved, wasn't it, for the champions?
Yes, sure. I think if we go back, 7 weeks when the tournament started and the podcast there, I think Alan and I both said that we thought France would win it. And it depended. The winner would come out of Ireland, France in at the Aviva. It proved to be true. And I guess the other question we have to ask, before we get too hard on Ireland, is did the best team in the tournament win? And in my opinion, that they did. France were the best team. And while Ireland were ruining a Grand Slam, I think France really, really blew a Grand Slam that first 20 minutes at Twickenham when they left probably 4 tries in the field. They didn't score and lost the game by a point in the last March minutes of the game. So, yeah, the French were very happy, though, because this is such a talented French team. We've all said that and known that, since 2019, this really great generation. But for all that talent, they haven't got much to show for it, going out in the quarterfinals of the World Cup. And this is only their second tournament win in 5 years. So they probably should have won it a few more times. Last year they were very poor. But they deserve to win it. And listen, let's just also say, they played absolutely some magnificent rugby. I mean, really, really breathtaking tries. I mean, that try, Bill Berry's try against Ireland at the Aviva, there'll have to be some unbelievable try to stop that being the try of the year. So just a really good side, very well coached, really deep thinking on the game from the coaches, and obviously played some great rugby. And the only really sad point for all of us was obviously the injury to Dupont, because we're all going to be robbed of seeing him play for best part of 12 months. We won't see him play till probably Christmas next year, after Christmas next year. So that's probably the only blight for everyone, not just for the French, because I know Ian thinks the same. He's just a joy to watch, but still a very good tournament in the performances across the board. And if you consider Ireland, mate, one loss, and everyone's knifing him. Last year, one loss, won them the cup. So it's again, the Six Nations is so unique and so wonderful. Another great year.
Certainly is. Ian, if we take it back a couple of weeks, as Matt referenced there, France lose to England. Everyone's like, no chances. They sent back all the chances and they blew them. Sent back Jalabert and Pinot, the club, to play at Bordeaux-Bègles. Also, everyone's saying, is Galtier the right man? Has it been too long? Too many second place finishes? Beat Italy by 70, turned the heat on and the style on for 25 minutes in Dublin, outclassed them, and then at the weekend beating Scotland rather convincingly. Just shows how rugby is so quickly turned round, and now Galtier's won a couple of championships and all's pretty rosy and merry.
Yeah, it's funny how sport works, isn't it? I mean, sort of reflecting over the last couple of days, I mean, there's, huge question marks, I would say, about every team bar France. And, there is certainly no question mark into how France play the game. And probably for a lot of people, it's the correct way of playing. And it's the, keeping the ball alive. And there's a real mixture of a power game within that, and if you're to go through every team, England obviously came good in that last performance. So is that going to be their way of playing going forward? Ireland, there's question marks now of, is this an aging team, with some players on the wrong side of 30? Scotland, you would say close, but again, just not in the part of the table that they would want to be. And then you've got the bottom two, Italy and Wales. So, I mean, France as a purist, was an absolute joy following them, and some of the the numbers that they put together, 30 tries, 218 points, in a championship is really remarkable. And then Bielbarré getting 8 tries, beating Stockdale's record of 7, previously held in 2018. And that's always, if you're sort of to go back through the history of rugby, it's always a good sign that the wingers are scoring the tries. It means that there's an attractive brand of rugby, and if Bielbarré is the one that's finishing off all those moves and all those turnovers, it's a good sign for French rugby. And it was massive. Matt would know, a heck of a lot more than a lot living over there, how important it would have been, I suppose, to bounce back from the disappointment of the World Cup, and even to show that even without Dupont, that they can still get the job done, even though he is world class. But Luku, got his time to shine and certainly performed exceptionally well. So they were a joy to watch, and long may it continue. And it's up to the rest now to try and get back, or try to get up to their level.
Matt, if we stay on France, Ian referenced it there, Bielbarré just keeps scoring ridiculous records after records. Then, there isn't too many weaknesses, if any. I'm not sure you were convinced by Barassi in defence, but you can quote me if I'm wrong. But Fickou comes in. Also, Moefana steps up, player of the match, a couple of tries. Not that anyone was doubting him, but there were a few guys there that people maybe were just like, oh, can they step up to the highest of highest levels? And then Luku had a difficult Six Nations last year. Everyone remembers that. And then against Ireland, everyone was like, oh, when he comes on, it's a whole different French, which it is. But in my eyes, he was brilliant for the hour he was on. And he was pretty impressive against Scotland as well. Just he made it all tick without doing anything extraordinary. Would that be fair?
Yeah, very, very fair, Stu. Lucas, I watch him weekly playing for Bordeaux, and he looks like a light middleweight boxer, broken nose, bald head, square jaw, a couple of scars, and that's him. He's a tough guy.
Thank you for it.
Yeah. He is. He's that gutsy light middleweight that everyone, Marvin Hagler or someone like that. He's just a tough dude, and he tries his heart out every week. Every single week, he puts 100% into the game. He is not a Dupont or a Le Grec with this, amazing, silky, freaky skills. He's just a fighter, and he's the sort of guy you'd love to play with. The forwards adore him because he's just that sort of tough guy. But what he has got, he's got a great kick, but he doesn't box kick as we saw in France, or he can box kick, but he kicks long from 9, and that's a really difficult skill. Everyone know, because you've got to bring your leg through at a different angle to get the distance, and that leaves you open to a charge down. But he does it so fast that he gets this great distance from the ball and very rarely gets charged down, and he's just a terrier. And I also think I agree with that. Your summation, Stu, he had a poor Six Nations last year. He got dropped from the squad and they brought Le Grec in, and I thought he was going to stay there. But Luka got his opportunity on a 7-1 because the 7-1 suits him, because if he's the one back, he can play a few positions. You could put him at inside centre because, again, the tough little middleweight won't take a backward step. But he got his chance and he grabbed it. I thought Barassi made some poor reads. Well, I know he made some poor reads in defence. But then you bring in, one of France's best centres of all time, Gaël Fickou comes in and has a blinder. Moefana, I felt, has matured this year. He looks a lot fitter. Not saying he wasn't fit. I just meant he's got some real bulk on him in his chest and legs, and I think that's made him a bit quicker. He's had a very good championship. So where's the weakness? Ramos broke Serge Blanco's record for points. There's no weakness.
Michalak, wasn't it?
Yeah, sorry, Michalak.
Yeah.
And Peno's going to beat Serge Blanco's record for tries on all-time tries on the wing. It's a matter of time. So, look, it is a very good French side. I think Antonio might retire, the tight end prop, but they've got 2 or 3 others to come through. They've got another couple of outside centres that have been injured. Dumaru from Bordeaux being the one that I think can really step up. So there's not a lot of weaknesses. And we saw when Penot was out early in the games, the 2 young backs from Pau the fullback and the wingers, that they had unbelievable pace. You've got all these back rows. And if you consider France, like Ireland are trying to do what they're doing with 4 professional teams. In the French system, the teams are professional right down into the 3rd division. So, what they call Fédérale 1, National 1, they're full-time professionals. So you end up with about 32 to 34 teams in France that are fully professional. And it's just pumping through these players. And then each club has an association, which is an academy, and they're pumping kids in to the system at all levels. Some go to top 14, some go to the 2nd division, some to the 3rd division. It's a big issue because the French system is becoming like the English Premiership is to football. It's where the money is. It's huge money here. It is attracting some of the best players from around the world, and it is also going to make the 7-1 split really hard for the other countries, because France are one of the few countries who can pick 14 top-line forwards, and therefore they're playing a pack for the first half and basically a brand-new pack for the second half. Ireland, Australia, and all these other countries in the second that have this lower populations, that's going to be really, really hard for them to compete with going forward in the future.
And even just picking up on that, like obviously the 7-1 has divided a huge amount of people. Obviously going back to when Razzie did it with South Africa, but even I went through the 3 games in which they used it, and if you're to look, whenever they first started it off with, Italy in 36 minutes in the second half, France 38, Italy 7. The Ireland game, which is the one that sort of stands out the most, in a 28-minute period, it was 34-0. And then against Scotland, probably a little less or so, in the 19 minutes, it was 19-3 that France put on. And that's where they, whether it's been fortuitous or whether it's been thought out, but that's where they have won these games from minute sort of 45 to minute 70. And obviously the Irish example is the most obvious, given the quality of opposition that Ireland are, and being in Dublin. So it'll just be, that's probably the only question I would have for them going forward, is that going to be something that they're going to lean towards going forward? I suppose, me being an outside back, I'd be biased in the sense of you would feel that it's very hard if you're an outside centre fullback or you're not one of these hybrid players, find it very difficult to get on the bench. But I know that's probably something that the coaches are happy with, in the sense that that's another string to their bow that they can put on if they do get a South Africa, in a quarter final. Would they go toe to toe ever in that scenario? So time will tell on that.
Perfect. So that's the champions wrapped up. Fair play to them, done and dusted. Matt, a bit closer to home, Ireland squeaked over the line in Rome. Ian was there against Italy. I suppose, in simple terms, where are they, Matt, in your eyes? Is it as worrying as many are making it out, or no? You're actually not that concerned.
It's a difficult one.
They won 4 games.
Yeah, it's a difficult one to answer, Stu. Like, if we go back, I just think in Ireland at the moment, it's either absolutely fantastic or a disaster. We were fantastic before we played New Zealand. We kept beaten by New Zealand. It's a disaster. We beat Australia. It's fantastic. Like, we're up and down. And the reality is somewhere in the middle. I think if you go back 12 months, Ireland put 5 tries to 2 against France in Marseille. And everyone said, France have finished. And look what's happened 12 months later. So we've got to be very careful and judicious here. I think that the jury's out. I think there's definitely our young 10s were feeling the pressure. I thought that had a significant impact on the tournament. If you look at Sam, I think Sam the tournament, and then I'll tell you, Six Nations, by the end of the Six Nations, everyone's exhausted, mentally and physically. It's really trying. It's a wonderful tournament, don't get me wrong. Everyone loves it. But the more you do it, the more you understand, players understand how they handle themselves. How do I get through this tournament? How do I mentally stay focused and recover, and physically and so on? And the young guys struggle. And I felt Sam looked burnt out. I don't think that's the end of him or anything, but he looked really tired. by that French game. And Jack looked like a guy that's got his contracts. He's worried about making the team. He wants to make the lines. He had so many things on his mind. When he lined up those kicks, the conversions the other week, he did not have 1 ounce of self-belief that he was going to kick that ball properly. He was stressing. You could just see it. And then Ian's a goal kicker. The way he hit those balls was just not a rhythm. He was completely out of balance. And so I think once we get those young guys more relaxed, more settled, and they get their contracts out of the way, they're used to the international, get more used to the international game and its demands, I think we'll see a big difference. I also think the injuries had a lot to play for Ireland this year. That team that we put out in Italy, even though they struggled a little bit, that was a pretty good side on paper, a good selection. But again, I don't think that Irish side recovered mentally from the disappointments of what they did in Dublin a week before. So you still have a very good Irish side. If you're going to dominate the Lions, which they will, you've still got a pretty good Irish side, at least for another couple of years. The age profile is concerning, but I think with one loss and all the things we spoke about, including the injuries, I don't think it's a panic time, and I don't think it's everyone throwing the baby out with the bathwater. I think it's, okay, they didn't do well. We also and the other part there, Simon Easterby, great person, Simon. I coached him in Ireland A years and years ago, a really good young coach. He was in his first year as a head coach, and I think he made a few wrong calls in his selections along the way. Now he's going to learn from that. The coaching is a process. So they didn't have their head coach, they had a replacement coach in who is a very promising young coach, and I think will coach Ireland one day. And then you add all those injuries and the other things in. I think there's a lot that can be settled and improved in the next 12 months.
Ian, just on that, and no better person to talk about the fly halves as a former one himself at international level. But I actually was sitting watching the game with Matt, and I said to him, what would I know? But as I always say that, but I said to him when Jack Crowley misses the kicks, I was like, I'm sure his head is absolutely frazzled. And yes, they're international rugby players. They have to deal with different things. But, contracts, Leicester, Munster, playing for Ireland. He wasn't number one in this Six Nations when he was last Six Nations. I don't know. Would his head not be absolutely all over the shot? Or are you just like, well, to be honest, he's a good enough player. He's a test match 10. And he should just be ready, and he should be kicking those goals, if that makes sense. And it's not as difficult as I'm making it out.
No, I think generally people need to take a step back and take a deep breath here. Ireland is in a very fortunate position to have two very good, promising players. Yes, maybe they're at slightly different stages just because Jack has that little bit extra behind him. But Ireland are in a fortunate position. And I suppose, me looking from out to in and you obviously pick up and read different things. What I don't like to see happening is there's this divide even further that seems to be happening between you're either in the Leinster camp or the Munster camp. Ultimately, when you're putting on the green jersey, you're representing the whole island, and the whole island wants to get behind whatever team goes out there. So I think all that outside noise, whoever is around those two players has a really tough job in trying to tone that down, because ultimately it's their performances that do the talking on the field. Being at the stadium, and it is amazing whenever you're at the game, because you just pick up on things and see different things as opposed to just watching it on the TV. And yeah, Matt is 100% right. You could tell even before Jack was taking those kicks that his confidence was low, and he wasn't missing them by a close distance as well. And Ireland's kicking percentage is pretty low. It was the lowest in the whole tournament at 66. And, I was not an outstanding 90% goal kicker, but you just know whenever someone is teeing up that ball, if someone is going to get that kick or not. And I don't know.
And when you were doing that, Ian, when you were at the time where your confidence was low, did the post feel about 2 meters wide?
Of course.
How does it work?
100. Well, I suppose it's like being a golfer. If you're even though I'm not, but I can imagine that the greens seem a lot bigger when you've got confidence, and when your confidence is high in goal. With your goal kicking, the posts can seem even wider than what they are, and just what you're doing. So I sort of almost tried to put myself in their shoes, thinking if I was 21, 22, 23, breaking into the Irish team and you had all this extra noise around you, how would you deal with this? So that's why I'm saying I think it's vitally important for the people that are around, and I'm sure obviously that includes the coaches, that people just need to take a step back. These guys will grow. These guys will develop, and sport, as you said at the top, Stu, things change very quickly. I mean, it's not so long ago Wales won a championship, and in a World Cup cycle, everyone is witnessing the worst run in Welsh history. So I have no doubt that you would hope that Jack Crowley stays in Ireland. I think it would be a good thing for him to do that, because it's going to be a ding-dong battle between the two of them. They're two very different players, and you never know. One might get picked for a certain game in a certain style that you want to play, but that ultimately, I'm a big believer that ultimately that will bring out the best in both of them.
Matt, do you buy into anything over the last, I suppose, year or about that? This is the first time that maybe Ireland are playing a slightly different style. Not the first time ever, but obviously over the last couple of years, a slightly different style than that of Leinster. And they're not quite adapting to it. The fact that maybe Leinster are kicking a bit more and playing more of a defensive game, but Ireland are still trying to play their attacking structure and shape that we've known has been so good for the last couple of years. And maybe there's a bit of a disconnect there, or are you not having that?
It's an interesting one, Stu. Ian Madigan, who Ian and I both work with, he pointed out to me the change in the number of phases that Ireland hold the ball for. So when Johnny Sexton was 10, Ireland would play almost that Joe Schmidt style of multiple phases, getting up to 15 phases, 12, 15 phases. And Ian correctly pointed out to me, and I learned from him, that that number has really reduced, and that they are actually kicking a lot more from their own half. We saw Sam do it pretty well against Scotland. And if we think back against New Zealand, they did it. They ran the ball from everywhere, and Mackenzie kicked 6 penalty goals within Ireland's half, because they were getting penalised in their own territory. So I think since that New Zealand game, we have seen a bit of a shift with more kicking, but it's Ireland's short passing and multi-passing game that they've persisted with, which I love. I think it's been great. So what I think has occurred is the opposition, again, we go back to last November when Joe Schmidt arrived, he changed the defensive system that Australia played to an old school one, staying linked, coming forward, and so did France, used it, so did Scotland. Everyone is now playing Ireland, is not using a rushing defence against Ireland, because they've seen how Ireland, that attacking game that Ireland use, is loves the rushing defence because it leaves holes. Now, we've said this a few times on the pod and on TV. But what I think Ireland have to do here where they are now, they've got to evolve that game to say, well, if teams aren't going to rush for us, if teams are not so much sitting back, they're starting inside shoulder, coming up and pushing out. So by the time the ball gets out wide, there's a lot of defenders there. We saw France do it. We saw Australia do it. So they've got to evolve their attack for that challenge, which is they have to start getting the ball to the wider channels on occasions much more quickly. Usually when they get the ball wide, it's a pass to a forward back to a 10. A 10's got a forward runner. He might go behind him. So there's 4 passes before it gets to the 13 channel. And if you can predict it, and that's why rugby teams have analysts, so you predict what the opposition are going to do, and then coaches design tactics to mitigate that prediction. And right now, the defence is winning against Ireland's attack. So they have to evolve it. I don't think the Irish attack is bad in any way. I think it's still a very good and effective attack. It's just you win 4 out of 5 games. It's not a train smash. But what it is the opposition are figuring it out, which was what occurs at the top end of the game, and they have to evolve it.
That's interesting, Ian, being involved in attack yourself. Would I be fair to say Scotland would be one of the teams that do like to get it from so-called coast to coast very quickly, as a couple of phases, but they like to use the width, and it looks pretty, looks very good. But then maybe when they get into the 22, it doesn't quite get scores against the bigger teams. That, like, I'm just sort of making that up in the spot. I can see it from against France. So it just seems we need to change this attack, but how are we getting results for it? If that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, Scotland, if you're to look, statistics don't always obviously tell the whole picture, but Scotland are pretty high in, you know, completion of passes and meters, and even if you're to look at Blair Kinghorn, he's got the most meters, the most carries, and Ireland actually have the least in terms of defenders beaten, which is sort of incredible, because whenever Ireland were doing the multi-phase, that's usually, you know, whenever that sort of stat would be higher. I think Scotland have that approach because they have the players to facilitate that. So if you're to look and put player by player, say for a back line, you would say that Scotland have out and out pace over Ireland. So if you're to go through every player of Blair Kinghorn, Darcy Graham, Van der Merwe, Hugh Jones, even Tuipulotu whenever he's playing, I would say that even just the back three is quicker probably than the Irish back three. Now, I'm open to having that incorrect, you know, on any tests or anything like that. But just watching the games, you would see that, say, a Scottish back three is more dynamic, hence why the ball obviously needs to get shipped to them as quick as possible. So potentially that is something maybe to be looked at, but you also play to the advantages that you have. I don't think, there's nothing drastically wrong with the Irish attack. It's gotten maybe a little bit slower. There has been a couple of variations. You know, we've seen the innovation of a back coming through the middle or a forward coming through the middle of a pod, which was introduced against South Africa, and now that's been brought into Super Rugby. So there are innovations been brought in. But I will back up Matt's point that I just think defences have caught on to that style of play. They're not rushing up as much, and ultimately, if you don't win the advantage line, you're not going to create that much. I mean, as much as rugby changes through the rules, it's still a game of the advantage line, and you got to earn the right. Like, again, don't want to dwell too much on the Italy game, but last weekend, but Italy stopped Ireland on the advantage line, whereas Italy, a few of the times with Capuozzo and Menoncello, were able to break tackles, and with their speed, were able to make those gaps. And maybe that's just something that Ireland are just lacking a little bit. But I don't think there's a need for a whole drastic change. It's just maybe a simple thing of just speeding up the ball a little bit to make sure it's not so predictable.
Matt, a final one on this. A couple of years ago, people were saying Ireland lacked a bit of power. Then they went toe to South Africa and they beat them. They did it against France. And then over the last while, even though we've known it for years, Ireland don't have gas men. They don't have ultimate, absolute, rapid pace men. It's almost, but yet, you know, Tommy Bowe, whatever. Yeah, you go back in the day, Simon Gagan, not that old, but you know what I'm trying to say. Yeah. But it's almost as if, right, if one thing doesn't work, and maybe it's the outside noise and whatever, I'm just picking up on what I'm reading and hearing, and I want to get your professional opinion on it. You know, after the size was sort of nullified and we lived with that, now it's the speed of play and the speed of wingers. What's the next thing? Do you buy into like one facet of the game that are, yes, we'd all love to get loads of sprinters coming, you know, through the academies and brilliant, but maybe we don't have that and we need to find them. But is that the overall thing now? We don't have enough speed throughout the teams, or is that just another thing and a bit of an excuse to why we aren't quite there?
Probably do all of the above, Stu. There's definitely a lack of, and when we let's.
I'm sorry, I'm not saying Mark Hansen.
No, that's my point.
Or slow. That's the thing.
Yeah,
I'm sure they're as quick as.
They're quick.
Game or whatever. You know, they're quick.
They're certainly quicker than me. I'll tell you that. But the point is really, since Shane Horgan has made the point, Dennis Hickey was like a national sprint champion at his age group, schoolboys. You know, he won the 100 metres. That's fast. And really, since Dennis, we haven't had someone who would compete in a national sprints championship. And that's what you've got to have, because Bill Beery, Chisholm Colby, these guys are doing it. They maybe not do it over 100. They do it for 50 or 60. Penno as well. You go down to New Zealand, Will Jordan, you know, he is rapid. You know?
Like we did have Jordan Armour and stuff, but it just hasn't quite happened in the green jersey for guys like that.
Exactly. Brady Igo, who I worked with for years, wrote a lovely article on the weekend and saying that sprint training should be part of all players' development, because it's not just, it's also about, learning how to run correctly and change angle and agility. But the sprint and agility training that we used to do, that was part of the process maybe 15, 20 years ago, has been dropped, and how it should be returned, so that you can't make someone a world-class sprinter, but you can make them better. But if you think of all our under-21 teams that have won the championship, under-20 teams that have won the championship over the last few years, we haven't had one guy out the wing you go, wow, he's lightning, and that, so it is an issue, because the other countries are producing or importing. Van der Merwe and Darcy Graham are very, very quick guys. Van der Merwe will make the Lions test side again, we're predicting. So, but Ireland aren't doing it. So it's not like we're just making something up. It is an issue, but it's a long term. That's not something we can solve tomorrow. That is a long-term issue. And so Mac Hansen had a great game on the weekend. I thought he was Ireland's best. Did a lot of really good work, and we used Mac as a second distributor. James Lowe's left boot, like Dennis Hickey, had a giant left boot. So Dennis was fast, but he also had a kick on him like Lowe. So Lowe, they used Lowe to exit their territory so brilliantly, and Lowe is very good at it. Lowe's not slow either, and a big man. So it's not a train smash, and I don't think we can blame our starting wingers for that. There was no doubt when we lost both wingers against France, it was an issue, because we had guys playing out of position. On the Osborne playing on the right wing. He never played a second on the right wing. He's had some time on the left wing for Leinster, but none on the right. So that does make an issue for certain for the team. But I also think we're looking for problems rather than trying to solve them. So we thought France would go to us when the Ian statistics on the 7-1 were amazing. I didn't realise that. Yeah. Well, it's something I sort of thought that, but just to hear, I didn't do those numbers like put it absolutely brilliant. But everyone thought the 7-1 would get us at scrum and line out and more, and it didn't. The Ireland forwards were fantastic. Our scrum was fantastic. Our setup was fantastic. What we're all missing here, and me too, until I saw some stats, Ireland are missing a lot of tackles. They are missing a huge number of tackles. So while we're talking about attack, and rightly so, because we're not scoring the points we did, and our wingers, these are real issues, we are missing a huge amount of tackles. And that is something that Ireland really has to fix up, and relatively quickly, because if you can't go out against France and miss the number of tackles we did and have any hope of winning that game. Because if you look at on the other side, in the first 20 minutes when Ireland had their opportunities, France hardly missed a tackle. France were fantastic. France, no one in the ruck, everyone on their feet. We got 15 guys on our feet every time. Make a tackle, get your feet. Don't worry about contesting the ball. Make a tackle, get your feet. Don't worry about contesting the ball. So they put a priority on their D and not missing tackles. And unfortunately, we've missed a lot of tackles this year. And when everyone says it's just a truth. Your defence wins championships. It's just a reality, as unglamorous as it is. So I would be looking at our tackling technique and our defensive system more than anything else. But I think it's our technique, because it's not like we're not getting there. We're getting there, but we're missing the tackle.
Okay, so that is Ireland. No 3 in a row in history of titles. But 4 out of 5, what are we giving them? 7 out of 10?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I would say so, yeah.
Perfect. Right in. On to England.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Second place finish. Record winning Wales. Now starting to attack. As much as Matt's looking at me saying, oh, where's this coming from? But yeah, there plenty of tries. Well, to be fair to Steve Borthwick, people questioned his team selection. What was he doing at 10, 15, different variations throughout the back line. But yes, Wales are in a terrible place. But that was some performance.
An unbelievable performance, and to finish second, or to have a chance, going in after that victory against Wales, thinking that there's a chance of winning the championship if France slipped up, given what had happened in the first round, I think is remarkable, and credit to England. I think there's many different factors to this. I think if we're just to take obviously the most recent game, England now have their identity with this group of players. there's good enough players in the back line to play. You know, you pick out some of the Northampton players, been led now by Finn Smith, and I think he has really nailed that position. And I think he is a player that Borthwick does prefer in that position to Marcus Smith. Now, I wasn't, necessarily convinced with the Marcus Smith trial at fullback, and then there was a bit of chopping and changing, but it worked against France. I'm still not 100% convinced by it, but I'm convinced that Finn Smith is the test. Number 10, he brings a huge amount of calmness. He's not flash, but he generally does the right thing. There's so many green shoots, I think, for England. Itoje's found form. Their back row has been really immense throughout the tournament. The Curry brothers and Ben Earl, in terms of getting over the ball. Freeman scoring a try in every game. So I think all of a sudden now, and yes, you can say that England sort of turned it on from an attacking sense against the two worst teams in Italy and Wales, but at least they've done it. And I think they're in a much better position going forward. And when they do play like that, they're good to watch. And there's no reason why, given all the resources, given the amount of players that England have, there's no reason why they can't and shouldn't be playing like this. So I just hope that they don't go back to playing that the way they did against Scotland, because they have shown that with their power, they can mix it with their back play, their interplay, their offloading. Young guys like Pollock, everyone's talking about him now as the new guy coming through, showing the power that he has at such a young age. Like, that's exciting for England, but you just don't want them now to go back to a conservative game.
It's interesting, Matt. Many forgot, or not forgot, just said, I wonder where he is. But George Ford reminded a few people in those 25 minutes or whatever it was in the second half, come on. He's still got plenty to offer. But, Matt, for a team that got booed, as Ian said, off the pitch, even to win the Calcutta Cup, the crowd didn't seem to be happy at all with Borthwick. But yes, two worst teams, they've turned it on. But have they sort of turned the corner in your eyes? And you've been quite critical of them in the past. But what did you make of Saturday afternoon? Could you see that? Could you see that being in their locker when they delivered it?
No, I was pretty shocked. In both the poor, I thought Wales had put up a lot more fight, and I didn't know how England had played. Now, to be fair to England, against Italy, they played with some attack and moved the ball a lot more. But if we go back a bit, France lost that game and Scotland lost the game. England should have been 0-3 after 3 games. There's no doubt about that. They'll play those 2 games 100 times more, and they'll lose 99 of them. How France and Scotland lost those games is just, it's rugby. You can't put anything else. It's just one of those things. How did Finn Russell miss 3 conversions? And all they do is get one of them. It's 3 tries to 1. And the same with France. France butchered 4 tries, as we said earlier. So the problem I have with this English side is exactly what Ian said. I had no idea they could play it. They wanted to play like that. And Borthwick, he hasn't been sure how this team should play. He's changed his selection so often. He had 3 out halves, George Ford, and I thought Georgie Ford came on and played great. But he was sensational when he came off the bench. Absolutely. Finn Smith has the 10 jersey nailed. I don't think Smith is a fullback. The other Smith's a fullback. But if we think back now to Andy Farrell's time against England at the Aviva during COVID, that Ireland had been doing almost exactly what England have been doing. They changed their selection. They didn't know how to play. What's their style of play? And they played England at the Aviva in the last game of the championship, and I think it was 2022, and they played absolutely magnificent rugby. We'll remember that long throw into the line out. Jack Conan takes the ball, pops it back down to Keith Earls coming inside, trying the corner. Everyone goes, wow. And they played this really fantastic style of rugby. Ireland built on that over the years, and that's now their brand. If England go forward and keep playing like that, I think they could be a real force. But Borthwick's got to believe in it. And I actually think that's the problem. Now, that game against Wales might have convinced him. But if he believes in it and says, this is what we're going to do, and lets Wigglesworth, his attack coach, do it, they could be a real powerhouse.
I think he just needs to be brave enough to go with it.
Yeah, exactly.
Because they have the talent to do it, and this conservative approach, it can only get you so far.
And he sorry, Stu, saying that exactly when he was at Leicester, he didn't play. He played that conservative style of play. Now, it just doesn't work. It's just not working for England. The way they played on Saturday works, and the way they played against Italy works. If they do what they did against Scotland, they just got failed. Because will that style? Is the other, and I sort of get it. The style of play they used against Scotland will not beat France, will not beat New Zealand, will not beat South Africa, and will not beat Ireland. You know,
and it won't keep the fans happy either.
And it won't keep the fans happy, and it shouldn't have beaten Scotland. Scotland should have won that.
Okay, and I'm going to leave Scotland for the moment and go to Italy. You were there at the weekend against Ireland. They only lost by 5 points and could have not easily, but could have actually won the game. Is it fair from the outside? I maybe expected a bit. I know the tournament's so difficult and hard to get wins, but after last year, they had the expectation. I just felt this time there was a wee bit of the old Italy in some parts of the game, or is that too harsh? And did you feel that
fair.
Was it one step forward, two back, or one step forward, 1.5 back?
I wouldn't go that far in the sense of 2 steps back, but definitely as a whole, disappointing championship. You win 2 games and draw 1. The previous year, you would hope that you would at least pick up, maybe a couple of wins. And I think we always talk, and even when, I've been with the Italian team and you've been in the system for whatever, a decade or so, discipline is just the key thing. And discipline, it has been talked about with Italy for many, many years. And I'm not just talking about necessarily the 3 cards, the 2 yellow and the 1 red that was given in the game against Ireland. I'm also talking about the discipline in the 5-minute period whenever it's 19-all in round 1 against Scotland, and you think Italy, have got the momentum. Don't do stupid things. Defend a scrum so badly that Darcy Graham's able to skip through, make a pass, and Scotland go and score. And then 4 minutes later, Scotland go get another try. So 12 points without having to do an awful lot. That's discipline. That's discipline in doing the right thing and in staying in line, staying true to what you've been training and all that sort of stuff. And yeah, from that point of view, it's been a step backwards. I think if we're to park the France game for a minute, I think that, France that was never going to be a good day, considering France had lost to England previously and sunshine was out, dry ball, France playing jouet. It was always going to be tough. But the crucial game was obviously the one against Wales. I think if there was more of a cutthroat sort of feeling about it, Italy could have won that game a lot more. So I think on reflection, Italy will look back, and Casada, the coach, will look back with disappointment. Players that you would hope, like Lamaro, Garbisi, just haven't really kicked on, even though their club form has been good. But at international level, you would only say that Menoncello, Capuozzo, they're the 2 sort of star backs that are really shining through. Need a lot more from Lucchese, Cannone, these sort of players who have shown a little bit of promise, but now they're getting to the 30-40 cap mark. You can't afford silly mistakes that are still happening.
Matt, quickly, that's a really fascinating point. Ian's just mentioned, we talk about Brex and Menoncello, who's just an unbelievable quality, but it's actually the guys beneath them that you probably need. Like, in my eyes, Garbisi, I thought would be further on as his Italian development by now and be better than he is. Again, I don't know if that's right. And then Lamaro, at the moment he was dropped, and then he come on and did that. Look, it was very frustrating, but it was a stupid thing he did just before half-time. Ireland scored. You could tell he was in bits, and Ross Vincent was sitting beside him. It was nearly like the young guy and the old guy, even though Lamaro isn't that old. Just been like 2 discipline issues. But would you say the next level of player behind Menoncello needs to be better for Italy?
Oh, absolutely, Stu. And Ian's hit the nail on the head. Once you get past, Eddie Jones had the theory, which is a pretty good one. Once player gets to around the 20 cap mark, they get comfortable with the pace of international rugby. They understand it. They understand their position. And that's where you see them grow. And the guys that are hitting that mark for Italy are not growing. And that is a real problem. And not only that, like Lamaro is a great example. Like, to do what he did when he did it, off his feet, kneeling on the ground, to knock the ball out of the nine's hands at the 38-minute mark when his team was right in the game. I mean, that is, if a kid at school did that, you'd be really disappointed. But the captain of his country, like, that's crazy. You know, the restart, head-on-head restart, straight into Keenan's face. I mean, that's not a coaching. The players have got to take responsibility for that. Coach shouldn't have to say, listen, by the way, mate, at the restart, don't headbutt the other guy. You know, like when you run through. That's the players. But I've never been part of that Italian setup. But I am very disappointed in them this year for all the things Ian just said. If that team was to grow, and after that Welsh game where they were favourites, then they got in front, and then they led the entire game, and they hung on. You could see the pressure getting to them. But I thought that was a growing opportunity for them, a place to learn, and that they kick on. But they didn't. They actually regressed. And I feel for Coach Casado, because I think he's done a very good job with them in a lot of areas. And I thought their defence last year had improved. And when they played Wales, I thought their defence had improved. And then it falls apart again. So that's all of this is where the players have to start taking responsibility. And I would suggest that if Lamaro has been dropped, and obviously he was, there has to be something about the leadership group in that team that is not accepting or demanding standards from their peers. So usually at that point, it's a coach sets it, but it's his leaders, you know, who say this has got nothing to do with you, coach. This is us. Like if Martin Johnson was in that group, what would happen? If Brian O'Driscoll was captain of that group or leader in that group, what would happen? Keith Wood, you know, the leaders step up and take control. And it just seems to me a lack of player responsibility and leadership to help that team grow. And I might be wrong, but that's just an observer from the outside.
Okay, Ian, last 10 minutes here. Wales, another wooden spoon, 17 defeats in a row, going alongside Scotland back in the 1950s, I think it was, for the worst run in a Tier 1 nation. Matt Sherrod came in, bit of hope against Ireland, but then the last couple of weeks, not very good at all. And then really, icing on the cake was that 68 points, you know, conceded against England. The next appointment's going to be absolutely massive, but like, where do you even start? Like, it's the ridiculous question to ask, but like, do you have any idea where they'd start?
You start at grassroots level, probably. I mean, it's a very hard place to be. Believe me, I know it. I've been part of Italy's 30-plus losing streak. It's a really...
Yeah, can you relate to it?
You feel... 100%. You feel every time you're stepping on that maybe you're not almost worthy of being on the pitch. You feel this sense of pressure on you that you're literally fighting tooth and nail for every little inch, blade of grass, for any little decision. Wales, you know, a game against England didn't get any luck. But if you're slightly off or you don't get the rub of the green at international level, that's what's going to happen. The nuts and bolts of it is they just don't have a good enough squad. I mean, if we're talking about how many players are going to be going on the Lions tour, the only one I can really think of is Jack Morgan. And even at that, the back row is hotly contested. Yeah. So, you know, Wales have a severe identity rebuilding process that needs to be done. And that is going to take a long time, much like it's taken a while for Italy to even get back to the concept of winning one game, potentially two, on a consistent level. That's taken time. That's taken a new generation. And that's what Wales have to do. Now, some green shoots you can say in terms of actually when Sherrod came along, some of their attack was quite good and it mirrored what Cardiff were doing. And obviously when you ship big scores, though, you know, people are going to forget about that. But there was some positive steps in the attacking play, but it's a dark place at the moment. I mean, as I said, Jack Morgan's the only one I can think of, and then the only other player who I think can leave with some sort of credibility is Blair Murray, the fullback, who was sensational. But it's almost like going back to the sort of dark Irish days of the 90s when you were hoping for one or two players to get on the Lions, and that's where Wales are at the moment. So they're going to have to be a revamp of the grassroots stuff, the clubs, you know, which has been a problem for years, and obviously this is just manifested into big problems. Who's going to be the next Welsh coach? know I did an interview a while ago, and I thought it would be Michael Chet.
For it?
I know some.
Did you interview for it? Did you?
Oh yeah, absolutely not. They don't need me. But there's been a lot of, you know, Simon Easterby. I can't see how Simon Easterby would go. Some players have been calling for obviously a longer term project, you know, for minimum 5 years. For me, if the opportunity of checkout was there, you know, he's someone that obviously doesn't take much fluff, and he really gets he gets straight to the point, and Wales need to get back winning, because you can't have a situation where, you know, Wales are playing, you know, Fiji in November, and there's only 40,000 people in the Millennium or the Principality. You know, you need to get back to winning some games, and for me anyway, he will be maybe not a long-term solution, but certainly in the immediate, you know, in the next few years leading up to the World Cup, he'd be a good person to try and turn the fortunes around. But it's going to take a long time to get back to where Wales were maybe even 4 years ago.
Yeah, for the game of rugby, we need them back there though. So let's watch the space and see who their new coach is. Matt, Scotland. So I think it's Gregor Townsend's 8th Six Nations, a couple of third place finishes, but again, 4th this year. Great rugby in there, but ultimately against the top sides, not getting over the line. Maybe a bit of luck, or not luck, rub of the green. You know, they lost Blair Kinghorn foot and touch just about, and that would have changed the game at half time. Do I think it would have beaten France if they had scored? Probably not anyway. Do you think? I think he's contracted to next year, but what about Gregor Townsend and Scotland's future going forward? Is he still the right man in your eyes to lead the Tartan Army in football terms?
My gut feeling is yes, Stu, without being on the inside there. I think Gregor has had a difficult task, and he has made this Scotland are a much better place now than when he came in. Yet their results aren't showing that, because, you know, that if they kick one conversion. So Finn Russell last year kicked 95% in the Six Nations. He's kicking 36% this year. You know, if he kicks a higher percentage, they win the Calcutta Cup. And then on the last day, you know, they're only got one loss like everyone else. They're going into the game with one loss. So into the last round with one loss. So like I think when you put it, it's like saying the other side of Portugal.
And I actually always ask these questions: where should they finish? You know, it's easy for me to say, is he the right man for the job? But like, is third the highest they should finish, or second? You know, with the other squads. Yeah,
well, if you look again, we come back to the question: did the best team win the championship this year? Yes. And who was second best? Probably Ireland. England, were they second best? No, they weren't. They were very, very fortunate. They should have lost 2 other games, and Scotland should have been third. And that it's there or thereabouts. So where's Scotland? When Scotland will start winning this or getting themselves into a position to win the championship is when they beat Ireland. And that's their issue. They've got a mental issue with Ireland and a tactical issue with Ireland. And Ireland have just got them done for all money on every front. And it's like Liam was saying, I don't believe the Scots believe they, in their own hearts, they can beat Ireland. And they get sucked in pre-game to saying, yes, they can. And where they should avoid all comments on the outcome of the game. So we're going to give it our best. We've got to get the process right. You know, whatever it is. But don't say, yeah, we're going to win. Because it's sort of making it worse on yourself, you know. And I'm not saying that's the reason. But I think Gregor has to rethink his tactics taking on Ireland. I don't think there's any doubt about that, because it's just not working. But the other question is that, okay, who is out there that will do a better job? You know, and that's what I say about Galtier when he says, I've got to get rid of it. Well, who's going to take over and do a better job? Who's going to attract better staff? Who's going to drive it? Or I haven't got an answer for that with Galtier. I still think Galtier is the best man for the job up until the next World Cup. Who is the best man for the job in Scotland? Who should take it over from Gregor? I can't see anyone in the background just yet being able to do it. I think I think it's very important for the Scots right now. He's worn the jersey, and he's a famous Scottish player. And I think with so many non-Scots in the side who are qualified via time in the country under the residency rule, I think that's also important for Scotland's identity. And I think the players play for him. And I think Blair Kinghorn, the way he's playing, Pack, they just need, again, we've been saying this, Stu, every year, consistency. It's when they are at the best, Scotland are a good side and they can challenge everyone. We saw that this year. But it's that getting, and this is what makes Six Nations so hard. It's why Grand Slams are so rare. Getting consistency over 6-8 weeks, the 5 games, whether it's 2 away, 3 at home, 3 away, 2 at home. Gee, that's hard. It is really, really hard because of all the variables involved. And Scotland haven't mastered those variables.
Well, we have 60 seconds each left and a small matter of the Lions in a few months. Ian, just chucked it to you. You don't expect this at all, but there you go. Any bolters?
Any predictions on the Lions already?
Any bolters? Any bolters?
Bolters? What do you mean bolters, Stu?
Anyone you expect to go that maybe at the start you weren't sure?
Yeah, I still think there'll be a good Irish presence, both from the, if you're to read into everything, from the coaching staff and certainly from the players. I think some of the English backs, even like Tommy Freeman, might pull a little surprise, of getting in there. But I don't think, if I was to write down the squad, I don't think there's many outstanding changes that pre-tournament that I would have had. You'd still have a good contingent, a good amount from Ireland, probably next to be followed by England, and then you'll have Finn Russell, Xander Fagerson, is hotly contested back row with Scotland with Dempsey, Darge, Ritchie, and then there might be 1, potentially 2 from Wales.
Matt, who's your Lions 10?
Well, that's the question. So you read my mind. I think the bolter is going to be Finn Smith.
And you bought yourself time. I really like that.
You did. I'm glad you asked it in first. So I had to sit here.
That's experience.
I look like I was listening to you, mate. And I'm thinking, God, how am I going to answer this? No, I was listening. And Ian's right. But I do think the bolter is Finn Smith. If you're saying who at the beginning of the tournament did I not expect to be, and there would be Finn Smith. And here's the reason, mate. Unless they pick Blair Kinghorn at fullback for a test side, which I don't believe they will. I think they'll pick Hugo Keenan. Your 10 has to be the goal kicker. And all the 10s available, the Irish 10s, so Anscombe isn't going to make it. The Irish 10s, I think, might have played themselves out of the tour. And if you think of Finn Russell, he's kicked really poorly. So that they have a goal-kicking problem. And Finn Smith has played exceptionally well. He takes the ball to the line in a really positive manner. And that's going to suit the way Farrell wants to play against Australia. He wants to play a similar way to Ireland playing. But he hasn't got an Irish 10. So what would he do there? Well, Finn Smith could make it because his goal kicking has been excellent. And Finn Russell's hasn't. It's also... Then I think the issue is the captaincy, which is sort of an interesting one. But is it Caelan Doris? Does he make the side, or again the bolter I'll put in there for captaincy is Dan Sheehan, because he is 100% starting every test. He's the best hooker without doubt in the Lions, and one of the best hookers in the world. So does he start, and do they make him captain? He will start, so do they make him captain? Does Caelan Doris make the side? So, I would have Doris there myself, but they're all the questions that I didn't think I'd be asking at the beginning of the tournament that I'm asking now.
Well, Matt and Ian, France have reigned supreme in the Six Nations. We have plenty of rugby to look forward to in Virgin Media, but thanks for your time today.
Pleasure, mate.
Thanks, Sue.